Alright, what up dudes? Today I'm going to bring you my kits for the Thunderbolts. Now I know I'm a little late. I've seen around on YouTube that there's already a couple people who have done this, but I really liked the movie. I went back and rewatched it a couple times and I want to throw my hat in the ring. Now before we get to these kits, do me a favor, go on down and hit that like and that sub button. And as always, if there's anything you do differently or if there's a character you want to see next time, leave a comment down below. Now I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's go ahead and rip it with our first bolt.
Ugh, that was disgusting.
Now for Yelena, aka the White Widow, I thought I would make her more like what I thought Black Widow was going to be when I heard she was getting introduced into Marvel Rivals. Overall, I really like Yelena's character. I thought she's very well written and a very down-to-earth character. I didn't like her too much in Black Widow, but that movie has its own problems. In Hawkeye, I really enjoyed her character. She seemed very down-to-earth and very human, and that was only furthermore proved in Thunderbolts. Starting out, we have the Red Room pistol. This is just a basic pistol attack with roughly 12 to 15 rounds that deals critical damage upon hitting a character's back. Now for a secondary, we have Widow's Bite. This is where Yelena gets to fire. It's where Yelena can fire an electrical pulse that deals tick damage, slows the enemy, and disables their primary fire for the duration. I took a lot of inspiration from when Natasha hits Black Panther with this. Immediately, T'Challa falls to his knees and cannot move. Originally, this was just going to be your basic stun, but I thought that was a little too lame. So instead, I went for a bit more of a slowing type of ability, since T'Challa wasn't really stopped, he just kind of slowed down a lot. And as far as disabling primary fires, I just thought that was a pretty interesting way to make this stun different from the rest of them. Onto her first ability, we have Assassin's Hook. This is where she fires out Hook from her wrist and latches onto any structure she aims at. Additionally, she can also cancel this midair to continue her momentum and send herself flying. I just thought this was a pretty cool movement ability that's a little bit different from the other web type abilities we've seen before, or even Moon Knight's grappling hook. For a second ability, we have Fleetfoot. This is essentially a copy and pasted Black Widow sprint. However, when Yelena runs, she does not make any sound. That leads us directly into her passive Red Room training, where Yelena makes no sound at all whenever she moves, and she can climb up walls. Not like Genji, more like how Hazard does, where it has a cap to how high she can go up. Now honestly, for her ultimate, I wasn't too proud with what I came up with. I had several ideas where I wanted to use the Red Mist in order to turn some of the enemy's constructs or some of the enemy summons into your allies. In a similar way to if Yelena used it on a Bob turret from Overwatch, then it would then start targeting enemies. But the problem came when I realized Marvel Rivals doesn't really have anything like that, so it would kind of just be useless as an ultimate. So I wanted to pose the question to you guys. What would you give Yelena Belova for her ultimate? The final thing that I settled on was Red Room Sight, where Yelena straps on red goggles similar to what we see from the Hawkeye TV show, and is able to see enemies through the walls for the duration. This is essentially a copy and pasted Widowmaker ult, but it's the best that I could come up with, and I feel like it really fits her character, taking it away from a sniper style character where it would be so oppressive no one can ever really do anything against it except for just hide, like in Overwatch, and adding it onto this flanking character, it basically opens up the entire backline to her, allowing her to see where every single enemy is positioned and pick off anyone who falls too far away. We have US Agent aka the GOAT John Walker. Now I absolutely love John Walker. He's easily my favorite Thunderbolt. It's pretty widespread knowledge at this point that he didn't do much wrong in the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, other than just being told to do bad things. Oh, and killing a terrorist. Can't forget, that was a bad thing for some reason. Now while there were some points when John did act a little bit questionable or insecure, I still believe that he was a very good Captain America. He tried his best, and he was human, which I think is something that we're actually lacking a lot of in the MCU nowadays. However, movie critic me aside, let's get into his actual kit. For his primary, we have Star Spangled Sidearm. This is where John shoots his sidearm with steady high damage, and I would make sure to make it hit scan so that he could hit Falcon if he needed to. Overall, it's just the long barrel we get to see in Thunderbolts, and I think it would be a really cute addition. Overall, it's just the long barrel we get to see in Thunderbolts, and I think it would work really well to help him kind of handle flyers, much like how he couldn't in the show. Onto a secondary, we have a Legends Mantle, where John holds up the shield of Captain America. blocking incoming damage but not stopping him from shooting his primary fire. I also had a similar idea when making a Cable build, but John just uses it so much more and it fits his character so much more, and there's a lot more I can do with Cable. So let me know in the comments down below if you think that Cable should also have this ability, or if there's something similar I can throw into Cable to really make him unique when I upload my Mutants video. Now onto his first ability, we have Shield Shutdown. This is where John throws his shield, popping an enemy, knocking them to the ground, and stopping them from using any movement abilities for a few seconds. Now obviously this was inspired by Captain America's shield throw, but instead of ricocheting, this one is a bit more stun heavy. This is something we also see him use whenever he tracks down the terrorist who just killed his best friend. As for his second ability, we have All on Me, where John focuses, tightening up the straps of his shield, gaining additional health on said shield, and a damage buff dependent on how many allies are eliminated. There's some slight toxicity that I could see from behind this ability, but overall I think it could be really busted if you paired it with an Atom Res. So your whole team would go down relatively close together, John pops this ability, gets his +6 bonus, and then, or his +5 bonus I guess. John pops this, gets his +5 bonus, Atom Reses, now you have an absolutely super juiced John Walker alongside the rest of your team. Now for his movement ability, we have Leading Dash. This is a sprint that copies Captain America, but he can also charge his passive while he's running. This passive is Superhuman Stamina. Now to you Overwatch players, this will sound very familiar. Walker can hold control and charge up a super jump, just like Baptiste from Overwatch. Now the fun part about this is when you pair it with Leading Dash. This would allow him to jump much higher than Captain America, just like we saw in the elevator scene. This would allow him to jump much higher than Captain America, just like we kind of see in that elevator scene. I've never seen Steve jump that high, at least that I remember. Moving on, we have his ultimate, Vengeful Justice. This is where John locks on and dashes into a character within range, knocking them down and burying his shield in their chest, dealing insane damage in an AoE spread, cracking the floor, leaving it earthbound, stopping all movement ability. Overall, I like this kit for John Walker. I really tried to make him different from Captain America, focusing a bit more on that duelist part of him, where I feel like he would be a bit more damage heavy and a lot less shield heavy. He does help the team out quite a bit in Thunderbolts and tries to help out a lot more in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I tried to reflect that too with his constant backline support, allowing him to help a lot with flankers or even being able to pop his ult and lock on to a Spider-Man or a Black Panther in his backline that might be harassing some of his supports. Now, me personally, I'm a big fan of Taskmaster, and I actually thought that the Black Widow version had some potential for a new type of Taskmaster. I wasn't completely turned off towards it till the end of Black Widow. Immediately after they defeated the entire purpose of Taskmaster by removing the mask that allows her to copy things and never establishing she can do this on her own, they essentially removed the Taskmaster from Taskmaster. For primary fire, we have Mind-Blowing Entry.
What in the hell is that?
Moving on to our second strategist of the video, we are going with Ghost. Now, I actually enjoy Ghost in the comics and in current media. I do actually really like how this Ghost has a name, has a face, and isn't just a recluse in a suit. Especially with Ghost being such an obscure villain, I think this was actually a perfect candidate for a really interesting gender swap. Now for her primary fire, we have Projectile Deconstruction, where Ava pulls out a gun and shoots a projectile that deals additional damage when dealing headshots. Now, at this point I do want to say, I'm going to be referring to Ghost as Ava. That is because we don't know who Ghost is in the comics. I don't believe a name is ever actually announced. That's just for me personally. As for Marvel Rivals, I actually would like to see maybe something a little different than Ava. Maybe we keep the obscurity of the lack of name. But moving on, we have her secondary, Cellular Reconstruction, where Ava holds out her hand and a tracking beam of healing applies to all allies over time, gradually reconstructing all of their cells. I thought this was a unique take on her condition. I know it's not necessarily how it works in the comics, but we've stretched characters before in Marvel Rivals, and I thought that this was a pretty interesting way to do it. For her first ability, we have Intangible Flux, where Ava has a resource meter allowing her to disappear, not being able to be damaged or healed for the duration. I would make this a rather short resource, similar to something like Magneto's shield. Additionally, during this time, she can phase through solid walls, and if she hits the crouch button, she can phase through the floor, just not the floor of the map. And before I get a comment on it, yes, I know there's no crouching in Marvel Rivals, but we still have a control button or whatever you people use on controller. For her second ability, we have Tech Hijack. This allows Ghost to select any machine used by their enemies and reprogram it to work for their allies. Additionally, they can also supercharge any machines working on their team, or for Penny's Nest to work overtime, creating more bombs. And I would imagine this would have something awesome to do with Ultron's drones, but I don't have anything to work on with him. Knowing my luck, it probably dropped today. Onto her third ability, we have Temporary Flux, where Ghost fires a pulse that makes enemies fade in and out of existence, just like her, for a few seconds, making it much harder for them to string together combos. I see this as an interesting take on a Luna Snow style freeze that would help her deal with people like Black Panther who would try to dive her in the backline. While this wouldn't stop them from using their abilities or even really dealing damage, it does break up the combo, which can make Black Panther waste a dash, or it could make Spider-Man with his swing, or there's many different things it could do if it's not timed perfectly. I really like it. I think it could have some tweaking, but overall I think it was a pretty interesting way for her to have a stun ability that didn't actually stun. Onto her passive, we have Reflective Phasing. When Ava gets below half HP, she starts to sporadically phase in and out, stopping her from being healed, but also stopping her from taking damage. This is very similar to how Temporary Flux would work, where it's just on for a second, off for a second, allowing her to back out, but it would stop her from being able to heal, it would stop her from being able to do most of her work. All team-ups I'm going to cover in a section at the very end of the video, after we finish with Alexi. For her ultimate, I came up with Phantom Highway. This is where Ghost creates a horizontal area. This is where Ghost creates a hallway, allowing her allies to walk clean through walls in that area. Additionally, while in this highway, they regain health steadily.
It's getting so tense in here.
Who are you?
I'm Bob. You thought you were gonna be some great savior? You can't even save yourself.
And now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, I give you the man, the myth, the legend himself, the Golden Guardian of Good, Bob, also known as the Sentry in the Void. Now, Bob was a tricky one, I won't lie. For how many abilities he has, picking 4 was honestly kind of difficult. Now, in the movie, when Valentina says you can do anything, she means that shit. He resurrects people, he pulls powers out of his ass. Now, I love Sentry. I think he's a great depiction of how dangerous mental health can be to someone. Obviously, to a very grand extent, but still, he gets the point across. Making him not just a big punchy character was also kind of hard, but I think the kit that I landed on was fairly unique, all things considered. Starting out with his primary fire, we have Omni Pummel. This is a melee combo where Sentry deals fast, heavy strikes with no delay. Now, when I say no delay, I mean there isn't a recovery period for him between the end of his combo and his start of his next strike. In a similar way to what we see from Hulk, but unlike what we see from Groot. Onto his secondary, we have Thousand Sun Punch. This is where Sentry reels back, charges up his punch, and anyone he hits is sent flying backwards, and if they hit a wall, they're stunned for an additional second. Onto his first ability, we have Telekinetic Force. This is where Sentry shoots out a psychic tether, similar to how Emma Frost's health crystal works, and if it hits a character, he can then choose to push or pull them, and in a very similar vein to how Sue can push or pull people. However, it's much stronger and single target. For his second ability, we have Golden Streak. This is where Sentry flies forward, allowing him some aerial mobility, in a similar vein to Iron Man, but much faster, and if he hits anyone during this time, they get picked up and thrown in a similar way to the Fastball Special. I would see this not only as his movement ability, but also he can use it in a brawl style to really get someone in the backline, or he can fly in or even stop a flanker by flying into the backline, grabbing them, and hurling them off the map, or into his spawn, or wherever he needs to throw them. For his third ability, we have Mental Block. This is where Sentry holds his hand out, creating an invisible shield that stops all projectiles for the duration. At the end of this timer, or whenever cancelled, he reflects all the projectiles' damage in a single blast, very similar to Mr. Fantastic's big stretchy mode. And I'm actually very proud of his passive, the Golden God of Good. Quite wordy, I know, but this allows Sentry to hover by holding space, not slowly float down. When he hits space in the air, he stops falling and is still able to move. but he cannot get any higher unless he uses Golden Streak. Additionally, this also allows him to break through structures by walking through them, or push enemies if he walks into them. This would make him virtually immune to body blocking, I'd assume, except for the Thing. I think that would fall under a CC ability, so I think the Thing would be immune to him walking past him. But either way, being able to move enemies by just walking at them just gives him so much aura, and I love it. Now onto his ultimate, we have the Darkest Void. Now this ultimate can only be activated after Sentry has been eliminated. When activated, Sentry starts to turn solid black, expanding an area off of where his death marker is. As this area expands, anyone who touches the shadow on the floor instantly gets turned into a shadow, much like how we see in the movie. This essentially would act as a mass exile, making it impossible for the enemies to deal damage or healing. After the duration, Sentry regains control and instantly comes back at his death point at half HP. Now the duration of this ability is something that obviously actual game developers would have to tweak. I would make it shorter than the respawn timer, since essentially it's just a revive ability that also allows him to take certain characters out of the team if they try to teabag him, or if he just dies in a very advantageous spot for himself. Overall, I see this Sentry playing a bit more half and half of an Anchor and a Brawl style character. I can see him kind of playing back using his shield to try to help his team stay alive, and then when the opportunity arises, he just dashes in and just wrecks house. There are several ways to fight this Sentry, but I would love to see him be an absolute problem on the field.
Thing for me to do, and I want to break something.
There is something you can break.
While trying to find the clip you just watched, it's kind of saddened me how frequently Red Guardian is reduced to just a comedic piece. Now, there was a clip that I wanted to use from Thunderbolts where he saves a little girl, but Thunderbolts hasn't been out long enough for the clips to really be released yet, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I absolutely adore Alexi in the movies, and I also really like David Harbour. I think he's a fantastic actor. He's portrayed every character I've seen him play really well and with lots of emotion. But that's enough David Harbour glazing. Let's get into Jim the Goat Hopper's kit. For his primary, we have Soviet Strike. This is a melee combo where after 2 hits, he swaps to a KS-23. This is a Soviet shotgun capable of 4 shots before he swaps back to his melee strike. I wanted to mirror Cap's primary fire here with just how much Alexi tries to be like Captain America in order to fight Captain America, but realistically I would see this as a weapon he can swap to, instead of a shotgun he switches to after 2 hits. Additionally, I think this ability would make him slightly more fearsome than Captain America, whereas when Cap hits you with the 2-tap, he then just has his shield he gets to throw. It's more of a bit of a medium range ability, and it honestly can mess you up a little bit. But if you're punching someone and you pull out a shotgun, generally that's prime range. Onto a secondary, we have Red Guard. This is where Alexi holds up his shield. I would make this one resource based instead of HP to give him a slight difference from Captain America, but I could also see an argument for HP based. Any attacks that hit the shield are blocked until the resource runs out. Essentially, this resource meter acts as Alexi's patience for how long he can hold off before he feels like he needs to get in there and break something. Now for his first ability, we have Siberian Slam. This is where he springs into the air and then selects an area to slam down on, dealing AoE damage and knockback, or he can grant his allies shields. For his second ability, we have Moscow March. This is where Alexi sprints forward in a similar vein to Captain America. However, if he hits his crouch button, he can slide forward and knock down anyone he runs into. I would also love this to keep momentum as he slides down any ramped areas. First one that comes to mind is the payload version of the Wakanda map. Sliding to that first point if you're on defense, I feel like would be so much fun. For his third ability, we have Russian Enthusiasm. This is where Alexi shouts, releasing the same red energy we see from the Winter Soldier, giving all allies around him overshields, and a movement speed buff. Additionally, I would give Alexi more shields depending on how many allies he affects. Also, when these shields are depleted, their host explodes into the same red energy we see from Bucky's E, the little ball he shoots out of his fist, dealing damage to everyone around him and slowing them for the duration. For his passive, we have Hydra's Upgrades. This goes into a little bit more of the lore of Alexi that I came up with when making this kit. And if you guys are interested in hearing some of the lore that I make up for Marvel Rivals characters, you can either check out the YouTube shorts that I make, or I'll start including them at the end of the videos. Let me know in the comments if that's something y'all are interested in. Anyways though, onto his passive. This simply allows Alexei to gain some additional overshields whenever he deals damage. These are not the same shields as that he gets from Russian Enthusiasm, these are just basic shields. Now I actually have 2 ultimates depending on what I would like to see Alexei do. For his first ultimate, we have the Eldritch Guardian. This is where he screams out and erupts various Eldritch tentacles. Each time Alexei deals damage, the Eldritch parts of his body will passively lash out in like a 360-degree Groot wall, attacking enemies around him for a few meters. Now the reason I went with this for Alexei instead of just a copy and paste Captain America ult, if you actually read the Marvel Rivals lore, you can learn that the Winter Soldier actually had Eldritch tentacles growing out of his metal arm, or growing out of the nub where his metal arm was. And if you look around on the Super Soldier map, Hell's Heaven, I believe, you can actually see these mangled super soldiers with tentacles writhing everywhere, and I would love to see Alexei essentially be what would happen if Hawkeye never saved Winter Soldier, making him into the perfect vessel for whatever Eldritch god they have back there. Now alternatively, if they wanted to add him as just another Captain America clone, I could also see them giving him an ultimate that I call Motherland's Martyr. This is in a Captain America style shout and sprint where he releases an AoE, giving everyone the same shields as his Russian Enthusiasm. However, this time, anytime they take damage, it pops instead of just when it runs out, essentially turning all of his allies into tiny little constant grenades. Alright, moving on to the team ups. Essentially, I gave every character 2 since I thought there was a lot of synergy here, along with obviously the Thunderbolts. This is where Ghost is the anchor, gaining a healing buff, and all the others, plus Bucky, gain a fade similar to Ghost for a few seconds, allowing them to phase through walls or just not take or deal any damage for a couple seconds. The second team up I came up with was Patriotism Powerhouses, with Cap being the anchor. He gains a damage and an HP buff, which is unique to Cap, where John and Red Guardian can hit their team up button and add an effect onto their shields, allowing them to ricochet all incoming projectiles off of it. Moving on, we have Red Ledgers. This is a team up shared between Nat and Yelena, where Yelena gains a damage buff and Natasha gains a single use of Widow's Bite, like she should have had from the beginning. Next up, we have Golden Guardians of Good, where Sentry gains a health buff and Atom gains a flight ability similar to Golden Streak. Alright y'all, that was my kits for the Thunderbolts. Overall, I'm pretty proud of them. I think certain things could have been done better, so as always, let me know what you would do differently or who you want me to add to the Marvel Rivals roster next. With all that said, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.